many other...
This is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to WION Live, broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett, and in this bulletin we'll have updates on stories developing around the world. In fewer than 20 days, the Taliban has taken control of key border routes in Afghanistan. The militant group has already captured provinces on Afghanistan's border with four of its neighbours: Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, China and Pakistan. And the latest are near the Afghanistan-Iran border. Let's take a look at the headlines. Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar says there is an immediate need for a reduction in violence as peace in Afghanistan is crucial for the region, a view echoed by his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. The Taliban says it now controls 85% of Afghanistan's territory as the militants mount an offensive amid a US military withdrawal, though the group's claims cannot be independently verified. British police officer Wayne Couzens admits the murder of Sarah Everard, whose disappearance as she walked to her London home sparked outrage and a debate about women's safety. Haitian police say at least 28 people involved in the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse have been arrested. Among them are 26 Colombian nationals, 2 are Haitian Americans. At least 52 people have died in a fire at a food factory near Dhaka in Bangladesh. Authorities are bringing out more bodies from the debris. Dozens are still missing. A comprehensive joint study from multiple universities in the UK says the risk of severe illness or death among children due to the coronavirus is extremely low. And we will start the programme with the very latest on the Sarah Everard murder case. 48-year-old Metropolitan Police Officer Wayne Couzens has pleaded guilty to the murder. Couzens now faces a life sentence. The London officer who guarded diplomatic premises had previously admitted to rape and kidnap. 33-year-old Sarah Everard, a marketing manager, was abducted from a South London street as she walked home from a friend's house on March the 3rd. Her body was later found in woodland around 50 miles away in southeast England, around 20 miles west of Couzens' home. The body was hidden and wrapped in a builder's bag and was later identified via her dental records. A post-mortem report last month concluded she died as a result of compression of the neck. In March, hundreds of people marched in protest to Parliament Square, defying lockdown rules. Sarah Everard's murder sparked anger here in the UK and a passionate debate about women's safety. Next to Afghanistan, and days away from pulling out of the war-torn country, US President Joe Biden has strongly defended his decision to pull US military forces out. Joe Biden's expressed confidence in the Afghan military, insisting a Taliban takeover of the country is not inevitable. But Afghanistan is struggling to contain the Taliban's consistent and violent push for power. Joe Biden's also denied reports that US intelligence is forecasting a collapse of the US-backed government in Kabul in 6 months amid warnings of a civil war. Biden's confirmed August the 31st as the day the US military mission in Afghanistan will end, because he says the US military has achieved its goals in the country. Those were to degrade al-Qaeda and prevent more attacks on the United States. These were Joe Biden's most extensive comments to date about the US withdrawal. He says it's highly unlikely that one government will control Afghanistan after the US pullout, and he's urging the Afghan government to reach a deal with the Taliban to allow them to coexist peacefully.
Silly question. Do I trust the Taliban? No. But I trust the capacity of the Afghan military, who is better trained, better equipped, and more competent in terms of conducting war. What we went to do in Afghanistan, to get the terrorists to attack us on 9/11 and deliver justice to Osama bin Laden, and to degrade the terrorist threat to keep Afghanistan from becoming a base from which attacks could be continued against the United States. We achieved those objectives. That's why we went.
Ending America's longest war, Biden is assuring Afghan military translators that there is a home for them in the US, and says America will always honour those who served in the war. Planning to move thousands of Afghan interpreters out of the country in August, the US has asked them to apply for American visas. On Twitter, Joe Biden wrote that the nation's repositioning resources to meet terror threats across South Asia, the Middle East and Africa. Last week, US forces vacated the US epicenter of the conflict, the Bagram airfield. The airbase was used to hunt down the al-Qaeda perpetrators of the 2001 terrorist attacks on the United States that triggered American military operations in the country. The remaining US troops are now concentrated in the Afghan capital, Kabul. The Taliban continues to make territorial gains in Afghanistan. In the latest, the terror group has said that it's taken control of 5 key border routes in less than 3 weeks. This includes Islam Kala, which is Afghanistan's biggest border crossing with Iran. The Taliban says it will make the border post in Herat province operational soon. Earlier, the Taliban seized the Sher Khan Bandar border crossing. This post lies on the Tajikistan border. According to reports, the Taliban's also started collecting customs duties at the US-built post. The terror groups captured key border provinces of Baghdad, Takhar, Badakhshan, Herat and Kandahar. These provinces border with Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, China, Iran and Pakistan. The developments are alarming Afghanistan's neighbours. Tajikistan has approached Russia for help. Since Moscow has military installations in Tajikistan, Russia says the Taliban controls 2/3 of the Afghan-Tajik border. Meanwhile, Pakistan has closed the Torkham border post with Afghanistan, citing COVID-19. However, Islamabad has been fearing an Afghan refugee influx as the situation in the country worsens. Afghan security forces have launched several offensives to retake territories from the Taliban in the Laghman province. They say the Taliban has suffered heavy casualties.
په ترهګرو باندې یرغلیز عملیاتونه پیل کړي دي او هغه سیمې او ساحې چې ترهګرو نیولې وي بیرته هغه سیمې تصفیه شوې او دغه عملیات اوس هم د جریان په حالت کې دي چې دغه په عملیاتو په جریان کې ترهګرو سخت زیاته مرجوب لیدلې ده د دوی کسان مهم کسان وژل شوي زخمیان شوي دي.
July the 12th will mark the 5th anniversary of the landmark International Court of Arbitration against China's sovereignty claims over disputed islands in the South China Sea. But 5 years on, China has repeatedly rejected that ruling, and the dispute over the South China Sea continues to grow.
Tensions in the South China Sea have been simmering for centuries, and over the last few years these have only intensified. 10 nations lay claim to parts of the South China Sea: China, Taiwan, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, Vietnam, Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand and Cambodia. The Spratly Islands and the Parcel Islands, believed to be rich in resources and a crucial point in trade routes, have been the main point of contention. For many years, China has claimed indisputable sovereignty over the South China Sea. Some Chinese officials even refer to it as the country's blue national soil. At the heart of this claim is the U-shaped 9-dash line. It includes 90% of South China waters. The line was adopted from Chinese maps in the 1940s and represents Beijing's claim over the sea and the land contained within. In January 2013, Philippines took the fight to the United Nations. The island nation invoked Article 287 of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, challenging China's claims to a majority of the South China Sea. Both parties were invited at the Permanent Court of Arbitration to submit briefs on the Philippines' claims. However, China refused to recognize the PCA authority and opted out of the proceedings. After several hearings, on 12th of July 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in Hague gave a searing verdict on the lawfulness of China's island construction in the region and other actions in the South China Sea. China, however, stood by its claims within the so-called 9-dash line.
On July 12, 2021, we observed the 5th anniversary of the award of the South China Sea arbitration. The award conclusively settled the status of historic rights and maritime entitlements in the South China Sea. It declared as without legal effect claims that exceed geographic and substantive limits of maritime entitlements under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
Coming 12th of July will mark the 5th anniversary of a landmark international court arbitration that invalidated China's historical sovereignty claims over disputed islands in the South China Sea. But 5 years on, China's presence in South China Sea and around Philippines is only growing. Chinese boats, Chinese maritime enforcement vessels are more frequent than ever. In March this year, the Philippines complained of incursions by over 200 Chinese militia vessels into its exclusive economic zone. In the last 5 years, the Philippines had made 128 diplomatic protests over China's activities in the South China Sea. China has militarized the Spratly Islands. China allegedly has 3 airfields in the region. China's control over the South China Sea has geopolitical consequences for the United States. The year 2020 saw unprecedented moves by the United States military to deter China. Last year, both the United States and Australia rejected large parts of China's maritime claims in the region. United States has also been deepening ties with both traditional security allies, Japan and the Philippines. And even with Vietnam and Indonesia, the dispute has fanned the flames of the region's military and political rivalry, especially between China and the United States. Will the South China Sea spark the next global conflict? Bureau Report WION, World is One.
Next to Haiti and some more details on the assassination that took place this week. The Colombian defense minister has linked some of the country's retired soldiers to the killing in Haiti of President Jovenel Moïse. According to initial information shared by Haitian police, at least 28 people were involved in the assassination. 26 of them are said to be Colombian and 2 are Americans of Haitian origin. 17 suspects have been arrested in connection with the assassination of Haiti's president. The chief of Haiti's national police says that 3 other suspects were killed and another 8 are on the run. The detained suspects have been paraded in front of the media in the capital, Port-au-Prince. Colombia's defense minister, Diego Milano, says at least 6 members of the hit squad that assassinated Haiti's president at his home appear to be Colombian ex-soldiers. He's ordered the army and Colombian police to help in the investigation of the case.
Frente al magnicidio del presidente de Haití, Jovenel Moïse, en el día de hoy, la Interpol ha solicitado oficialmente información al gobierno colombiano y a nuestra Policía Nacional sobre los presuntos responsables de este hecho. Inicialmente, la información señala que son ciudadanos colombianos, miembros retirados del Ejército Nacional. Hemos dado las instrucciones por parte del Gobierno Nacional a nuestra policía y al Ejército para que de inmediato se preste la colaboración en el desarrollo de esta investigación para que se esclarezcan estos hechos. Toda la disposición de nuestra fuerza pública con la hermana República de Haití.
One of the two arrested Haitian Americans is believed to be a former bodyguard at the Canadian embassy in Port-au-Prince. 53-year-old Jovenel Moïse was fatally shot on July the 7th at his home by what officials said were a group of trained killers. Authorities tracked the suspected assassins to a house near the scene of the crime, leading to the arrests. Haiti is observing 2 weeks of mourning for the death of Moïse. The border with neighbouring Dominican Republic has been closed. The United Nations Security Council is meeting today in an emergency session to discuss the incident, and Dominican Ambassador José Alfonso Blanco has criticised the UNSC for not inviting the Dominican Republic to participate in the talks about the crisis. Blanco says the Dominican Republic would be the most affected if the crisis spills outside Haiti's borders. He's calling for a robust mission to re-establish peace in Haiti.
Frente a la magnitud de los hechos y la crisis que se vive hoy en Haití, país con el que compartimos una extensa frontera terrestre, entendemos que el Consejo de Seguridad debió invitar a nuestro país a participar de una manera activa, ya que seríamos el más afectado en caso de producirse un desborde de esta crisis más allá de sus fronteras. We have seen how the MINUSTA went down, then MINUSJUS, now the MINU, and well, we just saw what happened 2 days ago. So we need a robust mission in Haiti in order to help the Haitian people reestablish, of course, their peace. That I'm sure they need a lot at this point.
Next to Belgium, where hundreds of undocumented migrants have been on a hunger strike for almost 2 months now. Around 400 migrants, who are at 2 Brussels universities and a church, stopped eating on May the 23rd. They're demanding legal recognition and access to work and social services. The UN rapporteur who met the strikers has urged dialogue between the government and the migrants.
For nearly 7 weeks, over 200 migrants have been on a hunger strike in a Brussels church. Camp beds and political banners line the nave. They are demanding the Belgian authorities to give them work and legal recognition. Many of them have been in Belgium for years, if not decades, working in secure jobs until the pandemic hit, which left them without any protection and devastated various sectors of the economy, especially the hospitality sector.
Brussels is the capital of Europe, and we are in 2021. We are not slaves. We've had enough. So I hope that above all, with COVID-19 and the fragility of the situation, that the government will look for a solution for everyone.
Some even have families in Belgium and their children study in schools here. But applications for the right to remain in the country have been turned down for several of them.
I'm completely broken. I'm in pain everywhere. I don't know if I'm going to live. If I'm really going to have my papers, I'm doing this for my son because I don't want him to have a life like mine. That's it. I'm ready to die.
Tout simplement. Je suis prête pour mourir.
UN Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, Olivier de Schutter, spent several hours in the church. He has called for an open dialogue between the government and the migrants.
Urgently, there needs to be a dialogue between the government and the hunger strikers. in order to reassure them that their situation is effectively considered. And I suppose it would be possible to provide them, at least in the short term, an opportunity to legally work, contribute to Social Security, pay taxes, and then establish this mechanism allowing on a permanent, ongoing basis for people to be regularized when they are effectively integrated in the community and when they have a professional prospect, a professional project that justifies them being regularized.
Paramedics attended the strikers at the church. One was even taken away to a hospital in an ambulance. They say it's a regular occurrence.
Well, it is heartbreaking, and I very much hope there will be no tragic consequence from this hunger strike continuing. I did ask the hunger strikers not to put their health or lives in jeopardy. There are other ways of protesting than to run that risk, because it is a very moving situation, and these are dramatic circumstances these people are facing.
The Belgian government has repeatedly said that no blanket permission to work outside the current migration rules will be issued. The government even urged the activists to not spread false hopes among the strikers. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The European Parliament has passed a motion against Hungary's anti-LGBTQ law. Hungary had earlier brought in legislation prohibiting schools from using materials that promote homosexuality. The non-binding resolution was passed with a majority of 459 votes. EU lawmakers urged the Commission to launch an infringement action against members who violate the bloc's laws. The motion also demands a legal procedure that cuts funding for member countries for undermining the law.
Between a Europe of freedom and a Europe of hatred and oppression, the choice is very clear. We choose freedom, we choose equality, we choose democracy, and we choose a European Commission that will stand up for this freedom, for the freedom of trans people in Hungary, for the freedom of judges in Poland, for the freedom of everyone in the European Union to love who they want to love and to be who they are.
Budapest has seen a wave of protests against the anti-LGBTQ law. LGBT groups put out a rainbow-coloured heart-shaped balloon outside the Hungarian parliament. The parliament passed the legislation banning children's access to homosexual content. The government argued the law would be beneficial in curbing the increasing rate of violence against children. But members of the LGBT community say the law has legalised discrimination against them.
Teljes bizonytalanság van, viszont nem akarjuk betartani. Tehát bármit is jelent, mi semmit sem fogunk változtatni azon, ahogyan eddig dolgoztunk. Engem már az iskola megerősített abban, hogy amíg az iskola létezhet, addig nekem is van ott helyem. Tehát kiálltak mellettem, kiálltak az LMBT diákjaink mellett.
Hungary's legislation has drawn flack from all over the world. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's government has been criticised for muzzling the rights and freedoms of the LGBTQ community. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen had called the law disgraceful. She's also warned against a legal case against Hungary at the European Court of Justice. Moving on to New Zealand, where a hot air balloon crash has left 11 people injured. There were no fatalities. 2 people were taken by helicopter to the nearest hospital.
11 people were injured after a hot air balloon crashed in a New Zealand town on Friday morning. The incident occurred in Arrowtown, a popular tourist destination in the country's South Island, according to police officials. Police said 2 were seriously harmed and were transported by helicopter to Dunedin Hospital on the eastern coast of the island. The other 9 suffered bruises. It was initially believed that the balloon had crashed into a house. Officials, however, later clarified that it landed in an empty farm where it was supposed to land. Jim Bolt, the mayor of the Queenstown Lakes district, had reportedly told local media that it wasn't an emergency landing, but that the landing itself went wrong. Emergency services are still responding to the incident.
Local artists in Australia's capital, Canberra, have organised a unique fashion show. Called the Slow Fashion Parade, the event aims to encourage locals to make sustainable fashion choices. Waste materials were recycled and transformed into wearable fashion art.
For me, it's just really important that what I do has a sort of a low footprint and isn't creating a problem, but is part of solving the problem.
We really want to drum home about shopping local, shop sustainably, actually think about your choices when you're making them. People think that they need to have the newest thing on trend, but really if you buy good things that are timeless, that you can wear in multiple ways, well, you've got a whole wardrobe in just a few pieces.
And finally, a group of so-called mystic meerkats at London Zoo have picked England to beat Italy in the Euro 2020 final. The two teams will battle it out at Wembley Stadium in the grand finale to the tournament. The zookeeper planted England and Italy flags in the ground, and the meerkats' task was to knock one down. It took them about 5 minutes to choose England. And that's a wrap on this edition of WION Live, broadcast from London. Thank you very much for being with us. For more global news and updates, do stay tuned to WION. World is One.